So, here we are, the second episode of the Shovel Knight retrospective. If you have not watched the first part of the retrospective, then I really think you should, since I will be comparing Specter of Torment to Shovel of Hope a few times. But Specter of Torment is the third campaign added to Shovel Knight, and after Plague of Shadows was a thing, I did not have a whole lot of hope for this. But this somehow managed to be even better than Shovel of Hope with how fun it is. And this time we'll actually have a plot section that is longer than a few minutes, hopefully. I will say this, don't watch this if you don't want to be spoiled on anything, especially since I think you should experience this game's plot firsthand. This is your one and only spoiler warning, so without any further delay, I will jump right into the game. So this campaign is about Specter Knight, the boss from the Lich Yard in the original campaign. Now from what I remember, he was chosen a pull. Probably because he was one of the more interesting and mysterious characters from the original campaign. And that was definitely a good idea for them to do so, because he has one interesting story. So I'll be telling this story in order rather than how the game does, so here goes. Once upon a time, Specter Knight used to be alive and was an adventurer along with a friend named Luan. His human name was Donovan. Donovan and Luan were going to loot a tower that had been long abandoned, so they set out to retrieve a treasure said to be stored inside of the tower. However, he came across another treasure hunter, who told them not to interfere with the treasure, which was a locket. This treasure hunter was Shield Knight, and after Donovan tried getting the locket, the part of the tower they were in collapsed in and he fell to his death. Right after dying, the enchantress who had just possessed Shield Knight comes to his aid and makes him an offer to go around to different knights to recruit to the Order of No Quarter. So you go to different stages in whatever order you wish. I also want to highlight specific NPCs here that I should have done in the last review too. But better late than never, huh? So there's this chess dog thing and it's absolutely adorable and you can play ball with it for an extra bit of money once per save file. But if you just like playing with dogs, then you're completely able to play with it as long as you want. Look how adorable it is! Look, he's playing, he even starts chasing the ball after a while. Another NPC that's pretty fun is the lady from the Shovel of Hope campaign who dances. Here she does the same dance and she gets irritated that you ignore her and she leaves. You even get the ability to do a Vegeta pose from this by holding down. It's called giving people the cold shoulder. There's also this kind of sort of side quest where you splash a knight with flames to change his armor color, eventually breaking his helmet to reveal that he's a dragon the entire time. Listen boys, this is the only 1,000-year-old dragon we like having around. Got it. Last thing is this guy who gives you the kiss of death but dies himself. I couldn't get it to happen while playing, but I'm pretty sure there's a tiny chance for him to actually kill you from doing it. As well as after each defeat, an Order of No Quarter Knight will be at the tower for you to speak with if you so wish. I'd rather wait to go over the endgame part of the story until, well, the endgame section, so let's waste no time whatsoever and get to my favorite part, the gameplay section. The gameplay is the best part of this campaign, much like it was the best part of Shovel of Hope. But Shovel of Hope's campaign is slow as hell compared to what you can do in this campaign. Like, holy hell is it fast. So Specter Knight moves around the same speed that Shovel Knight did in his campaign, walking. However, one tool he does have is the ability to attack his enemies by dashing into them while he's in the air. This speeds up the attack and the movement speed of the regular gameplay. The levels are super well designed for this, as there are several points where you can chain dash attacks into other things like lamps and other enemies, which allows the gameplay to flow a lot better. Coupled with this and the fact that Specter Knight can climb walls and wall jump, makes Specter Knight easily one of the fastest and most mobile characters you can play as in the entirety of this package. The levels also have both health upgrades and upgrades to the magic system of this mode, that being darkness, and the collectibles of this campaign being red skulls. You don't have a world map to traverse, but you have a very interesting hub level which has armors, shops, and all the things you need. You go to levels through a mirror which teleports you to the levels you want, which you complete in any order you wish, much like a Mega Man game. Now, let's get to talking about the sub-weapons now, because I have a lot of things to say about these babies. The level hub here is great, honestly. It's themed after the Tower of Fate because you are in the Tower of Fate, and the music in this hub is so calming and eerie, and I'll be using it in each Halloween video I make, guaranteed. But let's get to talking about it. Everything you could need to get is in the Tower of Fate, from sub-weapons to armors to even sub-weapon upgrades. This means any of the upgrades you could want are within reach. The only thing keeping you from owning pretty much anything that you would like is gold and red skulls. The level design of every level has been changed to accommodate this gameplay, which allows you to interpret how you should go through the room. But the curios, or also continue to call them, subweapons allow you to traverse stages in a number of ways depending on which subweapon you own and prefer to use. Yes, in this campaign, the subweapons are not found within stages, but are instead bought with red skulls from the tower. However, you need to complete a stage for them to be buyable. The way that magic works in this mode is that you get more darkness to use when you kill an enemy, which means if you balance the use of subweapons with regular scythe attacks, strikes, then you can get a good rhythm going. Let's go over each subweapon, since they are all pretty neat. The throwing sickle is a really standard weapon, but just like what I said about the flare wand last week, standard does not mean bad. I did not use it a whole lot, but it is useful. I mean, it's the cross boomerang from Castlevania. You can buy this one right after beating the first stage. The Dread Talon, this is my go-to weapon, honestly. I use this one a ton. It deals a ton of damage to bosses and enemies, like those annoying knights that can block your attacks. It's super simple, but it's my weapon of choice because of that. It's also unlocked as soon as you beat the plains. The Will Skull is the phase locket of this campaign. Sure, it gives you your health back. It's super cheap, and the cost to use the weapon is grossly cheap in terms of darkness, and I avoid it out of principle. I'd recommend you do it too, especially since it won't be helpful once you try a New Game Plus run of this game. Like the last two, it's unlocked right as soon as you beat the plains, but I would recommend never buying it. The Skeletal Sentry is an okay weapon. It destroys bosses when upgraded, but I personally didn't find much use for it outside of the room where I obtained it. It's unlocked for purchase after the Lich Yard, but you know, it's a skeleton that shoots lasers. What joke could I possibly make here? Ha 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 ha. The Barrier Lantern is super fun to use. It can be used to block projectiles, and each time it blocks an attack, it grows larger. It can be shot out whenever you want, but if you take damage, then you lose the current charge on the lantern. When at full charge, it can decimate bosses. It can do like 2.5 points of damage in total when fully charged. It's quite good. I learned how good it can be in stages with elemental hazards like the lava being poured in Pridemore Keep, or most projectiles. It's unlocked after beating the clock tower. The Shadow Mirror is pretty for me. I don't really use it ever, but it's kind of fun. So Specter Knight can make a double of himself that he can have fight for him. Each slash costs darkness, which can be quite annoying, but has its purposes, I suppose. You know, being able to safely attack things from a distance. You get this ability after beating Pridemore Keep, which I guess is thematically appropriate. The Spider Scythe is a cool weapon that clings to surfaces and spins around it. It spins around the platform that you attach it to. It's more useful to clear out enemies in stages than it is on bosses, and you can buy it after the Stranded ship. The Bounding Soul is like the Chaos Sphere from Shovel of Hope, but it doesn't listen to gravity, so a worse version of it. Okay, well that's not fair, but it certainly is harder to combo bosses with. You unlock this after beating the Explodatorium. The Cronus Coin is a sub-weapon which allows you to stop time. It's unlocked after beating the Lost City. The Hover Plume lets you recover from messing up a jump, like I do a lot, and falling to your death like a big stupid idiot, like I do a lot. I use this one a lot to recover from whiffing jumps. It's unlocked after being the Iron Well, and honestly, it's a big lifesaver. But it pales in comparison to what I usually use to recover, which is... The Judgment Rush allows you to dash through walls and stuff to get an enemy that you target when using it. This is great from saving you from bottomless pits super quickly. And easy. I'd recommend picking this up if an enemy is on screen. You can use this to save yourself. Ironically though, you unlock this item that saves you from bottomless pits after beating the stage with the most bottomless pits in it, so that's kind of ironic. Now, there's this one curio I could talk about, but I'm leaving that for the in-game section of the game because it's spoiler-ridden to speak of, and I would rather unveil what it is later, as well with a suit of armor that I should talk about. But, now I'm really proud of my last video, and how high the quality was, but one thing I wish I had done was talk a little bit more about other armors aside from the magic armor. I didn't do that because I only used the magic armor and failed to bring it up. and failed to bring up any other armor. Now, I didn't use any other armor besides the rail mail, but I'll still talk about the other armor quickly before talking about the rail mail again. The Cloak of Clemency is pretty much easy mode. When you fall in a pit, you lose darkness and get saved from it, and you lose less gold upon death. Practically useless in my opinion with how I play the game. Rail mail is easily my favorite cloak, as you can use the skating mechanic that you get on rails anywhere you want, anytime you want, allowing you to make long jumps and speed through levels at an incredibly fast rate. I think this is the objectively best cloak for going fast and skipping parts of levels, but you're free to disagree. The Striker Shaw. This one is like a worse version of the upgrade to your shovel that lets you charge it, because it's a useless armor upgrade instead of an upgrade to your weapon that will stack on any armor you have. I never use this over something like the rail mail, since when you charge it, you slow down, which is just the worst part and the worst way to play Specter of Torment. Especially when a Dread Talent attack does just as much damage and just uses darkness. Awful cloak. But the Raiment of Risk, this one's actually really interesting, because for each checkpoint you break, you get an increase to your attack power, but you lose max health, and your darkness regenerates automatically. This is a very fun way to play the game, and when I talk about New Game Plus, I'll be sure to bring this item back up again. The Ghostly Garb, though, it does nothing but make you look pretty. I'm dead serious, that's actually the description in the game, see, look. All of these can be accessed through the hub area, and aside from the sub-weapons, all of these can be bought from the start. Once again, the gameplay and sub-weapon section is probably going to be the biggest part of this review, but surely Snake went through another section about boss fights, right? They definitely reused the bosses from Shovel of Hope, right? No way in hell they would also redesign their fights, right? Right? Wrong, it's wrong. Well, looks like we're doing the exact same thing we did in the Shovel of Hope retrospective, eh? Well, yes. And that's because the new bosses have been altered to fit the faster pace of Specter of Torment. Each one is very different from their Shovel of Hope counterpart. It's small things that make this a big deal for me. I like how they made them a bit more difficult, since you have a lot more tools at your disposal here, like the floor dropping in King Knight's fight, Tinker Knight's entire first phase being altered completely to fit Specter Knight's moveset, as well as seeing his armor he uses in Shovel of Hope being unfinished, Mole Knight using the green goo that's bouncy in his fight instead of using the dirt blocks, and Propeller Knight fooling you into thinking it's the same exact fight just to destroy the floor completely. A lot of these go a long way to make this campaign memorable as hell. The new bosses we have are fun too. Black Knight may as well be a completely new boss with how he attacks and fights, especially with his turtle that I'm sad got hurt like he did at the end of the campaign. The Lich Yard also got a new redone boss, that being the Thunder guy, the Phantom Striker from Shovel of Hope. And there's a new Reese boss fight too, which was pretty fun, but it's edgy, bahaha, funny. That's pretty much all I can say about the boss stuff, so it's another short section, but a fun and memorable one nonetheless. So, the bosses weren't the only thing redone by the game designers. The visuals and music also got an upgrade. Now, the overall visuals and music are similar, so I want to highlight some differences in this section and talk about why I like them so much. So I want to first talk of the many visual differences in between stages in this campaign compared to Shovel of Hope. All of the stages are different visually. For example, the first stage, Plains of Passage, is dark and right before daybreak with reds and purples and blues, while a slow version of the theme plays. I really like this one too. Whenever I wake up before sunrise, I imagine this theme because of how it sounds. Pride and War Keep is also really good too, since this is the only area the Enchantress has taken over that you play through. And as such, the music and atmosphere are much more upbeat since this is an enemy territory like it is in Shovel of Hope. The blocks of this tower also have not been turned to gold yet, which was neat, but it makes the stage look weird. Coupled with the visuals and the music, it creates a much more welcoming atmosphere though. Those are some of my favorite examples, but other stages like Exploratorium and Lost City have substantial changes to them. Like in Lost City, you are above the ground for half of the level before venturing underground, and in the Exploratorium you go into the plumbing of the place. It's pretty wild, to be honest. The returning stages have some fun music, but I personally want to talk about the atmosphere and music of the flashback stages. There are 2 of these, and they both use the same melody paired with monochrome visuals. The first part being very adventurous and daring, yet all while being a slow and steady track. The second flashback stage is called Fate Approaches, and it uses the same melody as the first flashback stage, but it's much faster and dangerous. The new music added to Specter of Torment is honestly great, and I love how much effort went into making the same levels feel different. We have one more main section to talk about. So, throughout the game, people have broken into the tower a few times. The Great Baz does a few times, and Reese does it when he gets corrupted by the Enchantress, and finally Black Knight does, telling Specter Knight that he needs to act fast as they could save Shield Knight still. This is the first time Specter Knight realizes that he has been working for Shield Knight, which angers him a ton. This causes him to give chase to the Enchantress to the top of the tower to take his revenge. The actions of Specter Knight here are really interesting to me, honestly. He was fine working for the Enchantress and building up her army to save himself for the entirety of the game up until this point, but the second that he learns that he's been working for Shield Knight is the moment he snaps and decides he's had enough. I imagine maybe it's because he thinks Shield Knight took everything from him from his perspective. Another way for you to interpret this is that he might perceive this as Shield Knight had taken the power that he wanted in the first place, ignoring that she was trying to keep him and Luan safe. He says that he's going after the Enchantress because she's gone mad with power, but the music of the Tower of Fate stage says another thing altogether. The stage music is not a remix of the one from Shovel of Hope, but it's a remix of the flashback stage music, and it sounds angry and fast. The track name also supports this, being called Hitting Close to Home. There are several parts of this track I love in combination with the Tower of Fate visuals. I love when you're climbing the tower at first and it's night, like it had been all game. But then suddenly the sky goes dark, with reds and purples, and then thunder strikes, and right as you approach where the boss fight is, the green rain that had been in the stage in the Shovel of Hope counterpart starts pouring down. This paired with the music makes me feel something fierce, honestly. I can't put into words how much I love this theme paired with the stage and the placement of the story. At the end of the stage, you come across Black Knight, once again, who wants to stop Specter Knight from doing what he's about to do. His boss fight here is kind of a mirror to his boss fight in Shovel of Hope. He still takes flight, but he only does so on his pet turtle thing, Terrapin. It's a tough boss fight in normal mode, and it's definitely doable. Not much to say here, except the boss fight theme is still an absolute banger, and RIP Terrapin, you were the best turtle. Once again at the final stage, Specter Knight comes face to face with the Enchantress in the same room he fought Shield Knight earlier in the game. And at first this seems like an easier version of the Enchantress fight from Shovel of Hope, as there is actually ground. But eventually the ground goes bye-bye and you are once again up on dirt blocks that form the ground. This is a lot harder than in Shovel of Hope, since Specter Knight breaks dirt when he jumps. This makes it hard to know when to use your dash slashes to attack, and it makes it important that you use your relics wisely. I personally use the Dread Talons to deal a ton of damage fast when I have the chance, and the Spider Scythe to create a projectile in the middle of the screen, and of course the Judgment Rush to save myself from near death a few times. However, after you beat the Enchantress, she further corrupts Reese a second time to make him into this weird looking thing that I'm really unsure of what it is. This breaks the floor, and the final boss fight takes place on rails. I'm not gonna lie, the fight isn't that difficult to beat, especially if you have the Judgment Rush, but it's still pretty hard, not as hard as the Enchantress or the Black Knight was though. Afterwards, the two fall and crash land where Specter Knight had died originally, and the Enchantress appears and tells Specter Knight that she will recruit Reese into the army as the 8th and final knight. Specter Knight tells her that he'll join her, and then, instead of restoring his own life, he restores Reese's. After this, we see Specter Knight take Reese back to his home. This is where the credits roll, and we see what each knight that was recruited is up to, and how they took over their area that they have in Shovel of Hope. We see the immense power of the Order of No Quarter as they take over here. It's a really hopeless ending. We see Specter Knight at the end of the credits talking to Black Knight, warning him not to try and save Shield Knight, as the Enchantress would destroy him like she had done to Specter Knight. After this, Specter Knight has one last reverie, where he remembers an interaction he had with Luan before they set out to the Tower of Fate, where he and Luan are sitting around a campfire. Luan asks Donovan to protect his son, who is actually Reese, if he should ever die. He gives Donovan a locket telling him that he is family to him. Donovan says that's a stupid request because the two of them will prosper forever. After this, the end shows up on screen, and the story is honestly extremely tragic, and I remember almost crying a bit when this ending occurred originally. Another nice touch is that we see Specter Knight puts the locket in the chest where Plague Knight gets in Plague of Shadows, which I still hate. I still have one more thing I'd like to go over in this section, because I feel like it's relevant. If you manage to get all of the red skulls and give them to Red, he takes to the place where Donovan dies and gives you one more armor set and one last curio. It's an armor that makes you look like Donovan when he was alive, and the Caltrop sub-weapon that you had in the flashbacks. I'm not sure entirely why, but this makes me feel a sense of finality to the story as a whole, and it makes the ending not seem as bleak as it really is. Okay, so what's up here? Why aren't I going over the conclusion? Why am I wasting time on New Game Plus, you ask? Well, it's because New Game Plus is an entirely new experience that I heavily recommend. Remember back in the sub-weapon category when I said the Will Skull shouldn't be used because it won't be useful later? Well, I was talking about this mode. In New Game Plus, you have a combined health and darkness meter, which goes down alarmingly fast. This makes it absolutely necessary that you speed through the levels even more than before, as you can only recover health by killing things. This also attaches a lot of risk to using any sub-weapon, as it costs health now. Not only that, the Will Skull does not work here at all. The ticking health bar won't kill you when it reaches one hit away from death, and you can use any relic that's not the Cronus Coin, Judgment Rush, or Hover Plume as much as you would like. But the game for me changed drastically once this happened. The whole thing feels like an endurance run. This makes the Black Knight fight and the Enchantress fight absolute hell, let me tell you that. Before we get to the conclusion though, I also wanted to highlight one more thing here. That being the Raiment of Risk. I was very curious what would happen if you used the armor here, since in the normal mode it made your darkness regenerate at the cost of max health. And I was surprised at the result. Okay, so the way it works here is that it lowers your darkness and health meter to only 3 hits top, but it no longer ticks down. I also was not expecting that. I thought it would activate the power boost, but not the regen. All in all, this is the best New Game Plus mode in the entirety of Shovel of Hope. I'm not kidding. It doesn't just make the enemies hit harder like in Shovel of Hope and Plague of Shadows, but it actually changes the way you play the game, and I cannot be happier with that. But anyways, we should get to the conclusion, because we have a retrospective to finish. So, conclusion? Specter of Torment is a game that easily, and I mean easily, is better than Shovel of Hope on many, many, many levels, and I'm glad that it had so much effort put into it. Honestly, I'll say this. In terms of story, graphics, and everything that's originally tied to this one, I think this is the best campaign. I think this is objectively the best campaign. With all the originality that was put into it by the developers. But it's not my favorite. But if you don't want to play all of the campaigns and must only choose one, then I heavily, heavily encourage you to choose this one to play. You'll get hours of fun with this, and you'll replay it a lot. And I can guarantee that. I had the most fun with the feats in this mode. The no-hit challenges aside, of course. If you need any further encouragement, then it's only $10 to buy separately from the whole package. But anyways, the next time we resume the Shovel Knight retrospective, we are covering the last full campaign and my favorite one, King of Cards. That won't be this month, but maybe next one. Anyways, with that, this was a SnakeSolid production, and I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you next video.